p.m. Good evening, I should say, and welcome to all of our CAG members, community members, DPH staff in attendance, and others from the community to the 17th meeting of the Aliso Canyon Disaster Health Research Study Community Advisory Committee. As we've stated before, the CAG was established to provide input into the process and the results of the health research study efforts. My name is Susan Harden, and I will be facilitating and moderating tonight's session. And just a reminder to those who are joining that this session will be recorded, and thank you all for being here. For this third meeting, I guess, of 2021, we are staying Zoom format, which definitely seems to be something that most of the community members are more comfortable with than Teams and some of those other tools. So we are staying with Zoom. And just a note too, the CAG members will be allowed to unmute and mute themselves. That's the way we're setting this up. So we want you to still be able to use the raise your hand and the chat function as well in order to, we can call on you and we'll make it more orderly that way. We do ask that we don't talk over each other, you don't talk over presenters, and we'll make sure that we run the meeting from that standpoint. Our members of the public that are on the call will be allowed to unmute and mute when we get to the public comment period later in the meeting. So until then, feel free to definitely post questions or comments into the chat. All those become part of the meeting notes as well, so we can participate from that standpoint. I will just go through the agenda in just a moment, but before I do that, I'd like to ask Christine Vega to call roll of the CAG members, and this will be a good test of our mute and unmute tool as well. So Christina Vega, if you would like to call roll.
All right, so I have Andrew, Brian, Craig, Dawn, Mary, Melissa, Patty, and then I also see that Lori just joined. Did I miss anyone?
And we will keep watching as well. If anyone joins a little bit later, we'll make sure to document that also. So again, thank you to everyone for being here tonight. Our primary objectives for the meeting are to update the CAG and the community on where we are with the health research study, and to also provide some updates on related topics and some resources as well. Our agenda for tonight will be to start with Dr. Davis with some opening comments and remarks. We'll then have a short presentation from the Community Advisory Group. We did put the couple of slides that the CAG sent into this slide deck, so you don't have to share your own screen. We'll have those loaded up here for you after Dr. Davis speaks. And then for each of the other three blocks that you see, project updates, health study resources, and additional updates, we've allotted 25 to 30 minutes for each of those items. A short presentation and update or to bring everyone up to speed on those bullets below, and then the remainder of that time is allotted for CAG discussion and Q&A. We'll plan to get to public comment by 7:40. 7:45 if we need to, but that's really, we need to save a good amount of time for the public comment, and I'll work hard to keep us on task and on our agenda. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Dr. Davis to provide some opening remarks.
Thank you, Susan, and good evening, everyone. I just wanted to talk a little bit about where we are and some of what we've gone through, but I also want to acknowledge that this community has been through a major ordeal, and the magnitude of what happened, the disaster blowout, does raise some significant concerns and questions about the impact on the community's health, which are to be evaluated, through this Aliso Canyon Health Research Study. And in accordance with the settlement agreement, Public Health is not conducting the research. We are retaining a third party to conduct the health study and are consulting with the Scientific Advisory Committee as part of that solicitation progress, for the third-party researchers. And the specific goals of the study are being determined again in advance of the study, by the Scientific Advisory Committee or the Oversight Committee. And at the conclusion of the third year of the study, the Scientific Advisory Committee or Oversight Committee, and not Public Health, will conduct a science-based analysis of the study. Now, admittedly, this process has taken longer than any of us anticipated, but we feel it was necessary to ensure that there was broad community engagement and feedback which was not specified in the settlement agreement, but I think all of us thought it was important. And it was also needed time to establish and implement the external scientific oversight for the study, as well as to develop the application process for third-party researchers who will actually conduct the studies. Now, we've made significant progress this past year with the standing up of the Scientific Oversight Committee and with public review and feedback on the draft health study goals and priorities. And the CAG and the broader community have greatly informed the process to develop the study and its goals and priorities, including the extensive responses we received on the draft goals and priorities. Now, the CAG and community members have also brought several great ideas to the table, many of which we've incorporated into the work, notably the addition of additional expertise, to the effort, as well as, getting engagement with the community. And that said, we acknowledge that, the CAG has an ongoing list of areas of concerns, many of which we've previously responded to, and some of which we'll be touching upon tonight. But with the goals and priorities complete and major progress on the scope of work by the SOC, we're around the corner from releasing the RFP, which is a major milestone and one of the last steps before the research actually begins. Now, once the RFP is out, which we plan to release late summer or early fall, it's our estimated time frame, we'll be in a new phase of the study, and during that period of time, we'll be allowing for time for the researchers to prepare and submit their best ideas and proposals for conducting the research to address the study goals and priorities. And community engagement will then take a different shape during that time, but we will continue raising awareness about the blowout as well as the upcoming study. We know that the SD5 board office is paying close attention to the issues around the Aliso Canyon gas facility, and that our County Board of Supervisors unanimously called on Governor Newsom to expedite the closure of the Aliso Canyon natural gas storage facility in Porter Ranch. And we hope that the research findings provide scientifically based information to inform future decisions about the Aliso Canyon and other oil and gas facilities to better protect communities surrounding them. And in the meantime, I want to express my personal appreciation to the staff who've been dedicated to managing this process, and to reiterate our gratitude to both the CAG and the broader community for their passion, engagement, and feedback, through these efforts. As we continue to move forward in the meeting, of course, I will be here during this whole time, and I look forward to hearing what the CAG has to say and for the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Craig, I saw that you noted that you wanted to screen share. Are different than the two that you had sent us?
Yes, there's additional slides beyond those two.
And you're still planning on the 5 minutes that you requested? Is that doable then? Okay. So sure, if you can make sure that you get us those slides though, so we have them as a matter of the public record for the meeting.
Happy to be fully transparent and provide all the information from the CAG. Let's see. Please tell me if you see the screen.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to give DPH and the community an update from the CAG's perspective. We want to acknowledge and we appreciate, because we've asked repeatedly, that we be included as full participants in today's meeting. So thank you for acknowledging that and providing such a medium, because the past meetings we were muted and it was not a CAG meeting. It was a DPH presentation to the community. So we thank you for that. So as you said, this is the 17th meeting. We've been at this for some 22 months. And we believe, without a doubt, the community and the CAG have been exceedingly clear on what they medically need and want in the health study. And as we've described things, it has been rather consistent with DPH's Environmental Health Division's own mission statement. And it's worth reading once again because it's so critically important. So the group that we're working with that is in charge of delivering the health study fancies itself or positions itself to identify, prevent, and control harmful environmental factors in Los Angeles County, which sounds pretty good. And then it further goes on to say that your role is to educate the public on sources of environmental risk so that they are empowered to protect themselves, their families, and their communities, which even sounds better because then you're providing the information necessary for us to take good care of our own personal health. Yet, DPH in the county has refused to fulfill their mission statement and their obligations. And we anticipate that we'll have some further discussion, and we'd like to hear directly from DPH on why they have taken the position not to subpoena for the critical information that is necessary to do a proper health study. And because we found this on your FAQs, the CAG was not made aware of this. This was buried in your FAQs, and I've listed the source right there for everyone to go see. And I'll read it aloud. The Attorney General, Los Angeles City Attorney, and the county all agreed to settle litigation against SoCalGas and resolve all disputes in the lawsuits. And the county is not going to issue a subpoena seeking additional information, seeking information from SoCalGas. As we've said repeatedly, we made it our top priority every single CAG meeting. This is our top priority. And you are, by abstaining from this responsibility that you yourself described, let's be very clear. DPH is further damaging this community. And you're doing that by ignoring your mission statement. You're literally not doing your job. You're actively refusing to, this is a quote from your mission statement, identify harmful environmental factors. You further are going on to ignore the medical needs of this community by, again, direct lift from your mission statement. You're not being able to educate the public on sources of environmental risk so they are empowered to protect themselves. This is wholly unacceptable. We need to hear exactly why DPH and the county have taken these positions. It goes well beyond the failure to go and identify the chemical list for SoCalGas. There is a preponderance of open issues and data and fundamental data that are in common vernacular critical to the health study. And that's the CBC study, the existence of fugitive emissions. We've asked for financial reporting. The cancer research study, there are misleading comments that are being published about what the CAG's position is on the cancer registry study. For the record, we absolutely demand that there be a cancer research study. We do not agree with the methodology proposed by the individuals through CAG. We have proposed a solution, and I'm going to push hard on this and get through it all in a few more minutes, Susan. And there's many other things that Dr. Davis acknowledged earlier, and these things have not yet been resolved. The outcome of this ongoing delay of an average of 17 months has significantly impacted the confidence of the community in DPH in the study. And this goes well beyond just the CAG, who's on the far right, where I think we have a unanimous now. But last time we took this, we had one vote agreeing that they were confident, but we think that vote has changed. Regardless, if you look at, and we've had enough since our last meeting, 3 more NCs have voted unanimously no confidence in DPH in the study. So Northridge East, Granada Hills South, Granada Hills North, Chatsworth, and Porter Ranch neighborhood councils all unanimously agreed that they do not have confidence in the path that DPH is on. You guys have not remedied your own situation. There are over 750 surveys that were done, and on the far left here, you can see the percentages of those that do not have confidence in the path that we're on. The CAG has been in place for 23 months, and we have worked diligently and in good faith to make known the medical needs and wants of this harmed community. And we've made it very clear as you guys have a pre-funded $25 million health study. In response, however, DPH has not operated in good faith and has consistently delayed, lied, deceived, or covered up critical facts that further harm the community beyond the impacts of the worst methane and polytoxin release in U.S. history. So let me summarize here, and then we can get back to the meat and potatoes of this meeting. But this is critical. In direct contradiction to DPH's own mission statement and literally common logic, DPH's actions continue to damage this community's health as follows. We go back to the very beginning with Dr. Rangan's letter. Without identifying the chemical toxins that we were exposed to, DPH dissuaded physicians to properly investigate their patients of environmental health impacts from the blowout. Further, and against your mission statement, DPH lacks the due diligence of discovery of critical information to educate and empower the physicians and the community to properly attend to their previous, current, and future health concerns. This is past, current, and ongoing. We now discovered, because we had to look under the hood, it wasn't brought to us like you would think it should be brought to a CAG, the refusal to use subpoena authority to obtain the chemical exposure information from the negligent actions of SoCalGas and other information from other agencies. You could have subpoenaed, and it's completely outside the consent decree, the AQMD or the agency that did the evidence bins could have used subpoena authority there. And overall, there's no transparency and a lack of transparency and a refusal to perform DPH's fiduciary duty to protect the public's health. So this all culminates in DPH is perpetuating the community's ongoing health injuries and is in fact and indeed causing significant physical and mental harm. We are here to operate in good faith. We are not seeing that in a reciprocal fashion. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Craig. We will get into a few of these items that you bring up throughout the meeting this evening. But thanks for bringing those up and for sharing your slides. Dr. Davis, I don't know if you wanted to say anything before we move on.
No, I'm good. We can move on.
So as I mentioned, we will get into some of those items. I think Dr. Davis also covered a couple of them, but let's start with project updates. And I will turn the floor over to Chris to begin with, to give an update on where we are with the SOC meetings, the RFP, and just the health study at large. So Chris Vikulik. I know she was having some connection issues. Hopefully she's back on. DPH team, do you see Chris?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Okay, can we switch the slide? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to start off by kind of orienting everyone to where we are in this health study process. So I'll start off with this kind of big picture overview that brings us through the several phases of this health study. So the first phase of the health study was to identify health concerns, which is the far left kind of side of this screen that you see. And the community engagement and outreach was done extensively during this stage in a variety of different ways to identify those health concerns. And that included open houses, providing updates and soliciting questions at NC meetings, hosting a virtual town hall to share information on the health study, and hearing from residents about the Aliso Canyon disaster and the health study. Community opinion surveys were also conducted by a third-party research firm to, again, learn about the concerns and hopes for the health study that's up and coming. And we also, of course, established the community advisory group to serve as representatives of their respective neighborhood councils and stakeholder groups within their community. And the CAG has been helping and has helped on a variety of different outreach and engagement efforts. In addition to that, a body of renowned scientific experts composed of agency representatives and also independent experts was established to provide oversight and guidance throughout all phases of the health study. The scientific body, as you very well may know, is called the Scientific Oversight Committee and is composed of experts in the fields of epidemiology, disaster behavioral health, mental health, toxicology, community-based research, exposure assessment, environmental science, air monitoring, and air modeling. And as mandated by the consent decree, the Scientific Oversight Committee is responsible for determining the goals of the health study. So based on the community feedback and also their expertise, the Scientific Oversight Committee developed draft goals and priorities for the health study, which are made available on the Aliso Canyon website for a 6-week public comment period. And this public comment period has come to a close, and the public feedback has been shared with the Scientific Oversight Committee. And we'll get into that a little further along in this meeting. We'll provide more details on that. So earlier on in this year, we kind of stepped into the next phase of this health study and shifted over to a focus on research solicitations. So during this phase, there's going to be a competitive process to solicit research proposals, and we're going to award a contract to a research team who will be conducting the actual research as part of the health study. So this competitive solicitation process involves, again, a request for proposal. So this year, the Scientific Oversight Committee met 5 times already, and during those meetings, they focused heavily on the development of this request for proposal, including key components of it, such as the study's scope, the minimum mandatory qualifications that the proposers need to meet, and then also the proposal evaluation criteria. So additionally, the Scientific Oversight Committee was provided with the public feedback that was received during that 6-week public comment period on the health study goals and priorities. And they've discussed this as a group. And overall, they're feeling confident that the RFP is on the right track and will be keeping the public feedback in mind as they finalize that RFP and its key components during its final review. So in terms of next steps for the RFP, it's going to go under a final review by our DPH Public Health Leadership and the Scientific Oversight Committee. And then once that's completed, the RFP will be sent to our Contracts and Grants Division and also the County Council for another stage of review. We are aiming to release the RFP in the late summer of this year. The exact date is not set in stone yet. That will be determined once our Contracts and Grants Division has gone through the RFP. And we're hoping to award a contract in the spring of next year. And while this RFP process does sound like it does take a long time, it is an open process that allows for all interested researchers, other than SOC members, of course, to apply. So after a contract is awarded, we'll step again over to the right into that next phase, which is the research phase. And this is when the actual researchers who are awarded a contract will be implementing the health study and the research that they proposed. So after that, the next and final stage is mandated by the consent decree. So after the 3rd year of the health study and each year following that, the Scientific Oversight Committee, who will be overseeing the entire study and the research, will conduct an evaluation of the research to determine whether it's on track to meeting its goals, and will also determine the merits of continuing that study. So that is where we are with this timeline. And I'm happy to take any questions that people may have at this time.
Chris, maybe before we do questions on what you shared, maybe have Christina share the goals and priorities feedback, and that way we can kind of have some dialogue around that whole process, the RFP process and the goals and priorities document. So I know Christina had a few slides to share, and we'll be noting when that report will be made public as well.
That sounds good.
So Christina Vega, I will turn the floor over to you to share the next few slides.
Sure, if you could just, there you go, over to the next slide. So we received a total of, we received 287 online form responses. 28 of them were duplicates, which resulted in 259 online survey responses. Most were from Porter Ranch, and the online form included 14 close-ended questions and 10 qualitative questions. The online form, there were 63% from Porter Ranch, 14% from Chatsworth, 8% from Northridge, 7% from Granada Hills, and other neighborhoods was a total of 8%. Additionally, we received a total of 429 emails. 412 of them were identical letters, and 17 of them were unique emails. Responses were grouped into topics, and themes were identified. and responses were given one or more code. For example, like some of the broad themes identified were things like whether a response talked about health impacts, quality of life impacts, and other concerns about chemical exposure. So the qualitative responses were grouped into themes, and thorough results are given in the report. For now, as Susan mentioned, I'll just be talking about some of the high level findings, and we do invite you to look at the report online, which will be posted in the upcoming days. Could we switch over to the next slide? So the document mostly for the online form, some of the responses that we noted were that the document mostly or somewhat represented their hopes for the health study. That was 76%, and there were a variety of responses which people could choose from. So the percent that said mostly was 46%. The percentage that said somewhat was 30%, 16% were neutral, 5% said not really, and then 2% said not at all. And again, that's regarding whether or not the document mostly or someone represented their hopes for the health study. There was more concern for long-term versus shorter-term health outcomes. Some of the major concerns were cancer, respiratory, lungs specifically, immune system, neurological, and cardiovascular health, and worsening of pre-existing conditions. It also mentioned that another thing was that the study should gather health information from the people affected, for example, medical records, and that the study process should be unbiased, comprehensive, and focused on the local impacted community. Next slide, please. Themes from emailed responses mirrored those provided via the online survey form. In particular, it was a desire for a clinically based study, including examinations of study participants and long-term monitoring and follow-up, identification of chemical and other exposures, examination of exposures prior to, during, and after the blowout, as well as ongoing exposures. The delivery of comprehensive and complete data from public health, and transparency and limitations of existing data. That was it for the highlights of some of the overview for the health study goals and priorities. So now that we've covered those two topics, maybe we could take some questions.
Sure. And just to reiterate, Christina, you noted that these would be posted on the health study website within the next 2 to 3 days.
Correct.
So hopefully by the end of the week.
Correct.
Okay, let's open up for some questions. I think we were having some difficulty finding the raised hand function for the CAG members. So if you want to physically raise your hand, I'll watch for you. If you want to post it in the chat, or there's also other reactions. So if you put any kind of a hand wave or anything on your screen, we'll try to identify you there. We'll start with Andrew.
Thank you, Susan. I don't know who this question will go to, but I really hope it will actually get a substantive answer. And that is, I counted roughly 700 responses to the goals and priorities comment period, with an overwhelming, I would call it a supermajority of those, talking about what the CAG has in fact been talking about for eons, a clinically based long-term health study. My question is pointed, but I really hope answered, and that is, I want to know, I'm sure the CAG wants to know, and the public wants to know, with that kind of overwhelming response, how specifically has the goals and priorities document, the draft, been altered to reflect what the community has overwhelmingly told you it wants? Thank you.
Chris, I don't know if you want to tackle that one first. how those responses are being used? And you're still muted right now, so.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So all of the responses were sent to the Scientific Oversight Committee. They do hear you. They do understand that there is an interest, an overwhelming interest in that clinical focus. So they are aware and they're taking that into account as they're, reviewing the RFP that they've drafted. So that is in the works, and hopefully, that answers that question.
Unfortunately, it doesn't, because we're talking about having that. If you're having a draft, the goals and priorities, the expectation is it will ultimately be finalized. However, that gets used in the RFP process, or whether it's sent out as a standalone document, I don't know. But that document will be finalized. The purpose of the comments was to alter that document into its final form. And the CAG, I'm just speak for the CAG and for the public. How did the comment period and the almost 700 responses you received alter the goals and priorities draft into its final form?
So I think there's a couple questions there, and I'm just going to try to see if I can summarize them, because Craig or Andrew, what you're asking is how are those comments impacting the revision to a goals and priorities document? And what Chris was addressing was how those comments are getting folded into what kind of goals and priorities are being expressed in the RFP. So I think the question, Chris, is will that goals and priorities document, in addition to being incorporated into the RFP, will the goals and priorities document itself also be revised or to be a final goals and priorities document?
Yeah, so I think it's worth clarifying the purpose of the goals and priorities document to start. So first of all, the purpose of that and putting up kind of draft priorities and goals for the health study was to solicit comments and feedback from the community to ensure that the Scientific Oversight Committee was on the right track when they were kind of doing the scoping work leading up to the drafting of the RFP. So the additional comments and feedback received on those draft goals and priority areas of focus, that feedback is being used to inform their work in finalizing those goals, which are going to be in the RFP. So,
I mean, the responses back should have informed the SOC that what they delivered in the first draft was not reflective of what the community has demanded for years now. That is the logical takeaway from hundreds of responses of basically sharing that that the study the community wants and demands is a clinical based, patient centric. That wasn't what the draft document reflected, which is why those comments were returned back to public health and the SOC. It is only logical then that group would take the hundreds of responses, I believe more responses than it's ever received in any outreach in this process thus far, and say, whoa, the public is telling us we weren't on the track it wants. So we need to change course to bring ourselves back in line with what the public wants, so that these goals and priorities are finalized to reflect the public's desire, demand, wishes. You insert whatever word you want. That's the logical conclusion of that data set. And
Andrew, I'm just going to say, I see Brian's hand up too. He might be wanting to add some thoughts.
Go ahead, Brian.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I would let Andrew finish his thought pattern. I have a different specific question.
I mean, I can wrap. My point is, you produced a document, or the SOC produced a document. It got feedback. That feedback was very contrary to what it produced in the first go around. If I was on the SOC, I'd have to look at that data and go, whoa, okay, guys, I don't think we were on the track. The track that we were on is not what the public is telling us we need to be on. We need to revisit that. Now, moving back to the public side, for transparency, a word that, it's on the screen right now. With all due respect, if you don't put out a revised goals and priorities how can the public trust that 700 comments actually moved the process?
Thanks, Andrew. So I think that your question is a valid one, and we'll address that, whether there will be a revised version of that or whether those just get pulled directly into the RFP. But those are two different uses of that document. The document, the health study goals and priorities draft, will now be accompanied by a summary of the comments. So they're kind of a companion piece right now. Brian, Alan, and then Craig.
Okay, the dissertation we just heard and what's on the screen right now, and specifically what's on the screen right now, I can tie this somewhat into what specifically into what Andrew was saying, but my concern is all of these points that were just related to us are valid points. I mean, obviously we would agree with them. I mean, I can speak for myself, but let's just pick on one: identification of all chemicals and other exposure. If that's written here, I'm assuming that is going into the plan to revise the goals and procedures. But how is that going to be possible when we have already heard that there is no subpoena? So we have zero ability to identify what those chemicals are. So, I mean, we can identify a lot, I'm sure, I know that, but we can't identify all of them. And if we miss one that is important, then it nullifies the whole impact of the study. So I'm asking the question, what do these points mean? Are they going to be part of the revised goals and priorities and the RFP?
So I do want to point out that we are going to talk about the list of the data list in another agenda item as well, so we can dig into that one.
That's okay, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Craig, if you want to make your comment.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Okay, so Chris, you have explained to us your role within the SOC, and you work lockstep with them, and you at times facilitate, at times you're the scribe, and you helped author the original goals and priorities. So I would assume that role is consistent today. Is that correct?
So, Craig, I think what Chris does is help to administer, pull stuff together for the SOC, but the SOC ultimately looks at it, makes direction on what they think matches. To Andrew's point, the comments that got back, there are two ways that it could get used. One is in the specific goals and priorities, which there's a lot of feedback that there's some concurrence with the community. What you're talking about is the method or how to do it. And that could be something that influences what goes into the specific requirements for the RFP, et cetera. But that's what the SOC is also working on. Unfortunately, we can't go into all of that. We can't expose any details of that as they're continuing to work through that, because it is an RFP process and there has to be a lot of things that are confidential to that point. Now, I also recognize that for many of you, that doesn't sit well. But unfortunately, that's what we have to go through. They have all those comments. They have a couple ways that they can do it in terms of looking at it. If they agree and move and think that this is the way that it should go based on their scientific expertise, then they could do it in that way. So there are a couple ways for that to happen, but they are very intimately involved in terms of what that document looks like, and using those comments to modify based on their expertise.
Okay, well, I think my question would not violate any of the RFP proprietary issues that you're concerned with. It's very simple. The community needs to know, based upon the feedback, will the revised goals and priorities that lead to the RFP be driven by a study that is clinically based and monitor ongoing? Is there a shift from what we saw in the draft to what we should see in the RFP when it comes available?
Unfortunately, Craig, they're still in their process and we can't talk about that.
When can you talk
Be
about
assured
that?
that they do have those notes.
We get all that, guys. You guys keep talking about the process, which we understand. Okay, what we're asking is, how are we to have confidence that we were heard and that the study will be clinical based? How will we have confidence in that? You guys are playing dodgeball with this question.
No, actually, Craig, we're not playing dodgeball with the question.
Doctor, will this be clinically based? I'm going to mute myself. Will this be clinically based, yes or no?
Craig, I don't know. And we've said this before in terms of researchers are able to put out what they think will answer those questions. The SOC is working on the document to help ensure that the questions that are coming up, and again, you're talking about strategy, but I don't know what they're going to propose.
So I want to keep us, try to keep us at least to somewhat on time here, because we do have other items that I know are very important to discuss. I'm going to recognize Patty with a comment or question on this topic, and then I want to move into the FAQ and the data summary, which Brian has already alluded to. So Patty.
Okay, thank you. Regarding the RFP, I know that the AQMD, which is another public agency, does put out publicly the RFPs before they go out to possible vendors. They did that twice with Aliso, once with the $1 million quote unquote health study, and also with the air monitoring. We were able to look at it before it was even approved by the governing board. So I don't understand why we wouldn't be able to look at the RFP before they go out and not have an unpleasant surprise that the emphasis that goes to these researchers isn't emphasizing clinical study. That's my question.
So I think, and staff might have to tell me if I'm wrong, I think what they put out was a request for, what is it called, an RFI, interest. And when they do that, oftentimes it's trying to judge, is there anybody that's interested in this? Is there anybody that has ideas on what to do with this in terms of moving forward? And that's different than a request for proposals, which would be to actually fund a project. But that's my understanding. I could be wrong. Staff, if you know, please correct me if I'm wrong.
And if there's a short answer to that one, if not, we might need to go back to your contracts and grants.
Dr. Davis, this is Andrew. I'm pretty confident the AQMD put out the RFP publicly.
So we'll follow up on that and make sure that we get you a response back on what that difference is, particularly Patty, to that point on those two that you mentioned. And if we can get that answer here, we'll paste it into the chat or interrupt to get more details on that as we move through. If DPH staff can maybe talk to some other folks tonight as well. So I do want to move us to the next agenda item or next block, which is the health study resources. Christina was just going to make a short showing of the updates to the website for the sake of, I know that sounds like the CAG already looked at some of these, but just for the sake of the community to see what is new and what's being continually added there to the FAQ. And then Chris will talk about the data summary. So Christina Vega, I think you were going to share your screen for this particular piece. And if you're talking, we can't hear you. So I think you're still muted.
Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly go over the frequently asked questions page that was recently updated. This page includes information on the type of research that will be conducted as you expand each one of the topics here. There are other environmental and supplemental projects, including the Air Monitoring Fund, and you can find their status, on the settlement page. So if you're interested in finding out more, you can check that out as well. There's information on the environmental data and where you can find information on common questions we received from community members regarding the data, such as like the well kill, the well operations to stop the blowout. And additionally, there is also the radiation monitoring report that was conducted. It's now up on the website down here. If you go ahead and, expand here. And many of these topics that you're seeing here, we're also going to discuss later tonight and answer questions during the allotted time.
And the attempt here is to really try to put all of this in one spot. A lot of this information and the resources, so kind of a one-stop shop for people, for CAG members, of course, but also others in the community who may have similar questions. And as new questions arrive or additional information is available for these different areas, the staff will make sure that those get updated as well. So we just wanted to bring that to your attention and have you check that out. And it may raise some additional questions, and certainly want to hear those as well.
Yeah, and then the other last thing I wanted to point out is like all these green, these are hyperlinks. So like, for example, the regulatory agencies, if you want to find out more about what agency does what in terms of the SoCal gas regulators, there is also this additional page that was created that'll inform you more about, the federal regulators, state and regional. So that's also linked on that frequently asked questions page.
And Chris,
so, Susan, I'm sorry. Christina, is Christina done? I don't want to interrupt her.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want the public to be very clear that, yes, that page is updated, but the CAG has reviewed many areas of it. And the public needs to know that there are items we've asked about, like the funding per se, the budget breakdown. None of that information is there, located on that page. It's all placeholder fluff, and that goes back to the chart that the CAG, shared earlier. That these items that have been requested for months and months and months and months and months, and just never handled. So the public needs to know that.
So there are some placeholders, that is correct. But if there are specific pieces on that FAQ that you think are inaccurate or not, it would be good to specifically identify and share those in an email so that it's not the whole page that's being articulated as not as misleading.
So, with all due respect, Susan, the CAG has pointed out on a bazillion occasions, till we're all blue in the face, the areas of specific information we're looking for, and somebody made the decision to put up what's up. So with respect, it's not our job to have to babysit the IT staff putting information up. We have made the requests in writing, we've made it verbally, we've made it repeatedly. I'll just use the budgetary information as a very low hanging fruit. So
if you wouldn't mind, Andrew, if we could hold that one, just because we have that as a specific bullet here on the agenda. I just don't want to, I want to make sure that we give that enough, we can give that enough attention for the next item and not have to rush you through that one.
That's fine. What I don't see on the agenda anywhere else, so I'll just quickly do this. The meeting summaries are, I think, putting nicely, and I want to put this on the record for DPH staff, and I want to put it out there for the public. The meeting summaries are, generally speaking, a gross misrepresentation of what actually happened in the meeting, and do contain very serious errors in what the CAG's position was, whether represented wrong or just not represented at all, and present a picture of a meeting to the public or to the reader, whoever is digesting that in most cases is substantially different from the meeting that actually occurred. It's why we asked for videos of the meetings to be posted, because those give the public a truthful and transparent view into how this process has transpired over 23 months. So those meeting summaries need to be fixed. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I do want to let Chris make a statement about the data summary. I think it's connected here because this is one of the links here. Chris, would this be a good time for you to move to that next bullet point, and then we can continue the dialogue about what's on the FAQ and the data summary?
Sure. Yeah. How much time do I have for the data summary? Because it is a pretty long document and I wanted to go through it on the website and share my screen.
If you could go through it in about 5 minutes. That still gives us another 10 or 15 for Q&A, for questions and comments.
Okay, I'll do my best to.
It's a pretty dense table, so I'm not sure how much detail you're going to be able to get into on that anyway. But.
Yeah. Okay. So let me share my screen. All right. Can you see the website?
Not seeing anything quite yet, unless I'm just mine is slow to react, but I don't see anything yet.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So recently, we posted a data summary on the website. This is the main page, so I'll show you where you can find it. If you go to Health Study Introduction and Resources and then go down to Data Summary and click on this link, a summary should pop up. So let me just try to walk through this quickly. So the study team, the health study team at Public Health, has been working on compiling information and records and data related to the blowout and the gas storage facility operations. So the main purpose of this summary is to serve as an inventory of information related to the blowout and gas storage facility operations. We've made it available on the website so that it's readily available to interested members of the public, but then also to interested potential proposers for the health study contract. So I'll quickly go through. The first table in the summary lists chemicals and compounds of potential concern associated with the blowout and well control activities based on information that exists and data, including the soil and air samples that were collected, and also material safety data sheets of the well control fluids and materials. So this table can be augmented or supplemented when additional research and testing is conducted as part of the health study. Table 2 provides a list of technical reports of data that are related to the Aliso Canyon blowout failure, and then also assessments done afterwards, including the independent root cause analysis that was conducted. So this information here is also going to be supplemented with additional reports as they become available. In Table 3, this lists air sampling data related to the Aliso Canyon facility and surrounding community, including non-recurring sampling conducted during and after the well failure. So this information is organized by the type of sampling conducted, the target chemicals, the organizations or agencies that collected the data, including the South Coast Air Quality Management District, the California Air Resources Board, NASA, and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and also the LA Unified School District and SoCalGas. So in addition to that, it's organized by the dates that the sampling was collected, and then also additional notes on resources about that sampling event. So again, this Table 3 is air sampling data from kind of earlier on in the well blowout, so around October 30th to current sampling that's being conducted. Then we get into Table 4, which includes other environmental data, so sampling that was conducted in other mediums, including soil and water samples that are again related to the Aliso Canyon facility and gas storage facility blowout. So I just wanted to point out that this is also organized based on target chemical, the data element itself, there's a little description there, the organization that or regulatory agency that collected the data, the location that the data was collected. It's organized by dates as well, and additional information is provided in the notes. So a few things to note here is that the first row here lists California Environmental Reporting System submittals of hazardous materials and waste. So these are submitted on an annual basis to the California Environmental Reporting System, which is overseen by the EPA. And this includes hazardous materials and waste inventory reports. And SoCalGas is required to submit them. So in addition to that, there's also the second row here, which lists the well fluids and additives that were used during the well control attempts. And also additional information on that in the report that the OEHA put out a few years ago on those materials that were used. In addition to that, there's information, well, there's a lot more information in here, but I'll just point out some of the other few items, including the exterior home cleaning database that was provided by SoCalGas. So this is noteworthy because it provides the locations that exterior home cleaning was conducted, the level of residue density, and other important information about that cleaning program. So that's another noteworthy piece of information. And then as well, last item that I'll point out is the sampling that public health conducted of the waste bins that were being kept on site that contained materials from the blowout and also from the well control attempts. So that information is all in here as well. So there's a lot of detail. I just did a quick overview of what's included in here. Table 5 is going to be focused on data sources that are related to health outcomes. So right now there's 2 data sources that are available from public health. We'll be listing other ones in here as well, including the USC Cancer Surveillance Program, vital statistics data sets as well. So that will be supplemented with more information. So that's just a brief overview of this data summary. Again, this is meant to serve as an inventory of information related to the blowout and well control attempts and gas storage facility operations. It is serving as a living document, so it will be updated on an as needed and also as more information becomes available. So this is a really good resource. Go ahead, Susan.
I was going to say, Chris, this is something that is also intended for the researchers or any proposers to look at to know what is actually available when they're designing or proposing a research study as well.
Right, exactly.
Any other comments, Chris, before I open it up for the CAG?
No, I think that was my 5-minute overview of this dense document. So I'm happy to take any questions on this.
Great. And so I'm not sure if it was Craig or Andrew first, but I saw Andrew's hand first. So I'm going to say Andrew and then Craig, and then I welcome other CAG members. Oh, please.
Great, thank you. So, Chris, thank you for the overview. As you scrolled through, I did not catch anywhere, especially in I think table 3, the air monitoring data set, which acknowledges that the CCST called that sampling data pretty much garbage. I mean, anecdotally, that other scientists have reviewed some of this data and have significant concerns about it. If this document, I would fully expect someone who is a potential researcher who's going to apply is going to look at this document. Again, for transparency, why for table 3 is the CCST summary not included so that researchers know the problems? And I think table 4 showed the well kill. Somebody should have a pretty good estimate of how much fluid was used in the 7 attempts. So the ingredient listing was there, but someone should have been able to come up with, for this list, an estimate of the volume, and it should be included here so that researchers understand how much material was blown. So the CCST report, why is that linked? Okay, are you highlighting that?
Christine, are you highlighting something that related to Andrew's question?
Oh, yes. Can I respond to his question?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, the California Council on Science and Technology report is linked. It's in Table 2. So it is there for the researchers if they're interested in going through that report, along with other reports related to the gas blowout and operations. In addition to that,
I would say, Krista, real quick, thank you for putting that. I would suggest linking or asterisking Table 3 so that the researcher knows that that CCST report is there and it's something, quite frankly, they should view.
So thanks, Andrew. We can make sure that we'll make a note of that and ask DPH to consider that in any modifications to the table. Your other question was on the amount of fluid. And Chris, I don't know if you have an answer to that one or if that's something we need to look into as well.
No, I have an answer to that as well. So if you were to open the report published by OEHA, it does have a table of all of the well fluids and additives that were used during each of the well kill attempts and also by the amounts that were used.
Great. So that is in there. So Andrew, maybe take a deeper look. And if there's another question on there, we can make sure that we can address that as well.
Yeah. So Susan, my last comment would just be that somewhere on this document should be for, some maybe just an anecdotal comment that significant further information could be available in the links and that people really should dive. I mean, really drive them there.
Okay, that's not a bad comment that people, if they're really looking for something specific to dig in. Craig, and then I see Dr. Hector also has his hand up. So Craig.
Thank you, Susan. I know you guys were working on this table for a long time. What would have been of much, in addition to this, would have been of great value is to identify for the community what we were exposed to, summarize this, give us an estimate of what we were exposed to, why that hasn't been done. I'd like an answer to that. And then more importantly, this looks rather impressive, but you're grabbing a lot of reports that, Chris, as you said, SoCalGas is required annually or whatever to publish. Those informations are, they're not the full story. So to do this study properly, and we've talked about this from the very first meeting, a full chemical list should be required of SoCalGas. DPH has the subpoena authority, and this community needs an answer of why DPH is not exercising that subpoena authority. If you use the consent decree argument, I've already been advised by 2 attorneys that have read it thoroughly that you are not prevented from doing so. So there must be some other reason for that. So those 2 questions, please.
So Chris, the first was on estimating measure of exposure, which I'm guessing they're maybe because this is a little too complex, we'll just take that measurement, but I don't know if you have more scientific answers than that. A summary of our exposures. First question. Second question is subpoena.
Right. So I'll start with the first question. In order to have a good understanding of what the exposures are, we need to actually have the study to do that, the health study itself. The closest thing that we can get to actually knowing the potential exposures are community air monitoring or monitoring that's conducted within the communities. That gives us an indication of what, was picked up, what sort of chemicals or pollutants were in the air, and what the community members may have been exposed to. But in order to kind of get better, a summary, what you're asking, or better estimates or a better understanding of what community members were actually exposed to, we actually need research in order to have that information. I think the second question.
In terms of the subpoena question, I wonder if maybe Dr. Davis wants to take that one.
Before we move on from Chris, so we already know that the air, you're right, the air monitoring, if it was accurate, would be very telling. We know the air monitoring is not accurate, and that was defined by the CCST. It's not just my opinion. So therefore, that is why the clinical evaluations of the people in the community is paramount. It should be the requirement of the health study. Why is it not being made a requirement?
Thanks, Craig. And I think you've definitely reinforced that thought tonight.
Well, but I'm not getting an answer, Susan, and this community deserves an answer. So if you guys if you want to avoid this critical question, then don't answer it. And that'll just be further proof that you are not doing the proper health study and that this is a whitewash. That's purely your choice.
I'm just going to ask Dr. Davis to address the subpoena question. I do want to get to Dr. Hector's question as well, and then we can move to the next item too. But Dr. Davis, do you want to?
Yeah, I've repeatedly said the subpoena decision is not our decision. You have the response in terms of what the county is doing or what they're not doing it. And that's about all I can tell you. In terms of the exposures, some of that I believe in terms of amounts, I believe are in those reports. We're not doing the research. We've put out the questions and have asked for researchers to submit proposals to answer those questions, whether that's related to the long-term impacts or cancer or something else. And they could propose different types of strategies to do that. Again, and a lot of this is a possibility in terms of what they could propose, but it's being put out there for them to figure out the best way to answer those questions. And we expect that we'll receive a number of different proposals related to those priorities and goals.
Thanks, Dr. Davis. Dr. Hector?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Has the SOC reviewed this? Yes. My question is, has the SOC reviewed these documents and the sources of them, and how significantly do they contribute to the data set, or are there vacancies in the data set that they must take into consideration when developing the RFP? Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, do you want to address that one?
Yeah, sure. So the Scientific Oversight Committee has been provided with this information from the very beginning. This table has been added to and kind of revised as time has gone on, as we've kind of collected and continued to integrate and summarize the information that we have. So they have been provided with this information. We have provided them with extensive overviews of the data available, and they have a good understanding of the data that's available for the research. And they are confident that there is, a significant amount of information for a robust health study. So they are confident that the data available can support a good health study. In terms of any gaps, I guess there was a little bit less or limited air monitoring during the very early beginnings of the blowout. So that's one of the gaps that at least public health has identified. But otherwise, there is a substantial amount of information, and information is going to continue to be collected. As you know, there is a supplemental environmental report. A supplemental environmental project, not report, on air monitoring that's being implemented and kind of overseen by the South Coast Air Quality Management District, along with other regulatory agencies. So there is going to be additional community monitoring that's going to be conducted, and that additional information is again going to potentially supplement the information that is available for this bigger health study. So this isn't everything that's included in here isn't like everything that is ever going to be available. There is going to continue to be more information made available for the health study.
So Chris, I think Dr. Hector did ask if the SOC had identified any gaps, and then I want to go ahead and move to the next agenda. I want you to continue kind of talking about data and resources, so we'll keep the dialogue going there. But was anything specifically identified by the SOC as major gaps? I think it was Dr. Hector's question.
No major gaps. There are a few pieces of information that we were going after for a while, including that exterior home cleaning database, which we were provided recently by SoCalGas. So that was a major win, and that could potentially be very informative for research. So that is available now, and it's reflected here in this document.
And I do want to move to the next item. Andrew, I see your hand, but we do have a technical expert on the radiation information too. So I would just give a quick overview on the radiation, and then we also can introduce Jeff May, who is on the call, who might be able to answer more specific technical questions about radiation.
Susan, I don't want to move on from this respectfully. I did a dive into the link that Chris pointed out. Thank you for that. I'm just telling you as a layman, I would really have liked to know, as a resident of this area, that 208,000 gallons of well kill fluid was aerosolized and sprayed over my community. Those kinds of figures should be in that document. The figures that we know.
Thank you, Andrew. Duly noted. Chris, can you go ahead and do the report on the radiation?
Yes, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay, so maybe I can share my screen again because it is up on the website and I can just show people where it is. Yeah. Okay, can you see the website?
Yes.
Okay, so again, this is the Health Study Introduction and Resources page where you can find other information and resources that may be helpful related to the data. So in here, you can find the Aliso Canyon Radiation Survey Summary. If you click on that link, it'll open up. So the results are in this report, which is now available on the website. I'm going to give a brief overview of this information, and I'll try to address questions after this presentation. So in August 2020, Public Health collected samples from waste bins of materials of the blowout and the well control attempts that were being stored at the Aliso Canyon facility. And these samples were tested for an extensive array of oil and gas chemicals, including radioisotopes. So in response to requests from community members to conduct radiation monitoring to supplement the radioisotope testing, Public Health sent their radiation management team members up to the facility to conduct radiation monitoring. So again, this report provides the results of that monitoring and also comparisons to the radioisotope testing that was conducted. So just a brief overview of the results is that or before we get into that, when analyzing radiation survey measurements, it's common to compare them to measurements of background readings found in nature. So all the test results in here indicate that radiation levels measured from the waste bins that were measured were very low and comparable to background levels. And the low levels of radiation encountered do not pose an immediate risk to health. So the report also provides more detail about the results. So you can see that it provides a little bit more information on the types of radiation that were tested for. There's 3. In addition to that, the maximum alpha radiation measurement was compared to radioisotope testing that was performed back in August 2020. And the testing was also compared to, again, background samples of radioisotopes in the United States, so ordinary soils. Again, the concentrations of lead and polonium found in the waste bin samples are on the lower end of the average range in U.S. concentrations. And I did want to note as well that lead and polonium, those radioisotopes that were tested for, are both heavy elements and do not become aerosolized or transported through the air. And as a result, they do not pose an inhalation or ingestion hazard to the public. So that's just a very quick overview of the results here in the report. It does provide more information. If you scroll down, this first page is mainly about the meters, the monitors that were used, their check source readings, and then the results are on the last page here. So happy to try to take any questions regarding this.
Chris, and I see Andrew has his hand up. Just to know, we do have we'll have a short report on the CBC analysis update, and then also a note on the budget too for this agenda item here. But
I'll make it quick. I'll make it quick. Chris addressed a generic statement that these particles are heavy and don't get airborne. I would like someone who is an expert in this area to reiterate that in the winds that come off of that hill and in the dust clouds that envelop this community, it is fundamentally impossible that those radioactive particles could not be airborne. I want someone to say that to this group.
So I'm not sure that if, Jeff, I'm not to put you on the spot there, but Jeff Day, if that's something that you could possibly speak to.
This is Jeff Day. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Let me speak to that, but let me first say that so there was some initial sampling that was done of the sludge in the different areas. We were brought there to measure those to make sure that they didn't miss anything of significance, that everything was there. We checked those things, and the ones that we found that were slightly elevated was found in the sludge. It wasn't found in the other items that were there, only the heavy sludge. So we're not expecting these things to go very far. The particles are heavy. They do fall out. They don't go very far in the air at all. There's no way they're going to get off the property from where the sludge was. But I've been listening to you guys tonight, and I hear you guys' pleas. If you want me to check someplace else near your houses, I don't have any problem with that at all. I'm the first one that would come and say, hey, if there's a problem here, I want to find it. So I'm confident that there's nothing there at the moment. I have not found anything there of significance. We even checked for beta and gamma, even though we were told none of it should be there. It doesn't show up in those nuclides. We wanted to make sure that there was nothing there, just so that way we could say, hey, we were thorough in our inspection. So we went out there. We did a great job of sampling. I've got a master's degree in physics. I've been over the county now, radiation management program since 2011. And prior to that, I'd been doing sampling and emergency response for all my career. I'm happy to help figure something out if you guys have questions about radiation.
Jeff,
so far we haven't found anything though.
Yeah. So Jeff, I have a master's in tax, which of course means nothing when we're talking about what you're talking about. So I will defer. Okay. I will defer to you, and I thank you for your candor. However, this well blew when pressurized at 2,500 psi, which means everything in that ground was airborne. In some respects, it probably a fairly high altitude. It is, from my position, very illogical to assume that radioactive particles did not make it up, that were somehow magically contained in the property during, at the very least, the early days of this disaster. That just makes very little sense to me. So the CAG has begged. I'm sure you didn't know, so I will share. I'll be the one. We have begged for a comprehensive radiation test to be done all throughout the community. Because if you find radioactive particles in our community, it means that people could have breathed them in. And that is the issue with the radiation that I think this CAG is so terrified of, and that the public should know about. It isn't that we're standing next to a little pocket of radiation. It's that we could have inhaled these metals, and that would cause very serious damage to our bodies.
So as it is, even the quantities that we did find in the sludge, which was the greatest quantity of radiation, it was still at such low levels. Not that it's going to mean much, but we equated this to some tuna cans, and how many tuna cans of this stuff would you have to eat to get a significant exposure? It was like 49,000 cans. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to eat 49,000 cans of tuna straight, but I can imagine it wouldn't be pleasant if it was this dirt and sludge. But assuming you had just the radioactive component in that sludge, you would have to have eaten 49,000 cans of those. That's way beyond what a person's going to ingest from the blowout or from inhaling it. But a commitment I can give to you, though, is we're happy to come out. I can't come out to everybody's property, right? There's not enough people or workforce to do that. But we can pick strategic properties to come out to and say, okay, look, this one's closest. I don't know, this one's furthest. We could negotiate a few properties that I could come out or areas, and I would be happy to do sampling for you. I'm very confident it's not there.
Thanks for that, Jeff. And I'm sure that I know the CAG appreciates that, and probably be good to collaborate with the CAG and DPH staff to identify some of those locations. I do see Patty and Lori both with their hands up, so I want to make sure they have a chance to ask a question before we move to the next item. So Patty and then Lori.
Okay, I just want to bring up, and I don't know if it's relevant, but in October 2019, there was the Saddle Ridge fire that actually landed on the Salco gas site, and a lot of particulate matter did go through the community, and it has to be a concern of us knowing that there is radiation, just as residents who live in Simi Valley had the same concern about the Woolsey fire and the San Susana Field Laboratory. Is it possible that somehow that also helped carry these particles into our community? I mean, should I be concerned about going to my local Ralph's and shopping, knowing that I'm being contaminated by all these chemicals? Thank you.
Thanks, Patty.
Susan, I can address the radiation side of that. I can't address the other chemicals. So with Woolsey fire, just so you know, we were on that. We actually did do sampling. We actually went out. There was no transportation of any radiation with the Woolsey fire. They actually missed the radiation beds in there. But we were out and about. We were taking samples. We were ensuring that nothing had gotten out. Had something gotten out, we would make sure that people knew about it and that we would take care of that. We would have brought in the appropriate resources. But there was no radiation concerns that came from that. If there are concerns, we're right there with you. I live in this community too. I don't live next door to you guys. Wish I did. It's a nice area. But I live in this community too, and I too have to breathe this air. So I want to make sure that it's safe for you guys, just as it is for me and my family.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to ask Lori to go ahead with her question or comment, and then ask Dr. Simon to provide an update on the complete blood count study or analysis.
Hi, Jeff. Lori Evalsian, one of the CAG members. My question to you is, did you find any polonium in those samples, which is a product of the radioactive decay of uranium?
Very good, Lori. You've done your homework. Yes, we did find polonium and lead-210. Those are both in the studies that you can find that are listed on those web pages, but they're not in significant amounts. They are concentrated from the naturally occurring that happens in the soil because of some of the activities they do. Anytime we're moving soil around, we could inherently concentrate some of that background radiation. But if you look at the table that the front summary report on that page, you'll notice that when you look at the range of the T norm, that we're very low. It would be the front page. So go to page 1. When we compare it to the rest of the
there is no safe level of polonium. And if it was in the sludge, there's still sludge all over the stucco of my house. Right. So where does that leave us?
So first of all, the safe level of polonium, that's like saying there's no polonium in dirt. Just so you know, dirt has polonium. It has uranium and thorium. So it has the U-238 chain that you mentioned earlier, right? And the thorium-232 chain. Both of those in their chains end up with leads, poloniums, some radon. They have different things in this chain, right? Those things are in our dirt already. That's just part of natural background. So I'm not going to say it's not there. It's if you grow carrots outside, it's going to be there. It's in the vegetables I grow at home. It's always there. The question is what concentration is it in, and is that harmful to people or not? Right? Can our bodies overcome what little bits in the dirt? Right? I still eat bananas. We have potassium 40 in bananas. We find it in raisins. It's in leaves. It's in a lot of things.
Thanks, Jeff. I definitely want to make sure that we get questions answered, but also make sure we have enough time for public comment. If you do have additional questions for Jeff, please paste them into the chat, and we'll keep trying to get those answered. And maybe even we can do an additional Q&A FAQ style sheet after this meeting as well, if there are some more questions. You provided has been very helpful, really detailed information, and perhaps we invite Jeff back again at a future meeting too. I just want to recognize Dr. Simon to provide an update on the complete blood count analysis.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to provide an update on that investigation we're doing. So we did get the data from Quest Labs. It's, as most of you probably know, a large commercial laboratory, and they gave us everything we requested. We requested data from 2011 through 2019. We requested that it be provided not just for adults 18 and older, but also for children 5 to 17 years of age. We asked that it be provided for the Porter Ranch zip code 91326. Also the 3 zip codes that were used by Dr. Nordella and his researcher colleague at USC. And then we also asked for the data for 3 additional zip codes, 2 of which, again, Dr. Nordella and his colleague had gotten. I think one was Eagle Rock and one was Glendale. And then I noticed they had gotten data on a 6th zip code, Burbank. And I talked to Dr. Nordella about that, and he didn't really think Burbank was such a good idea because of the airport being there. So I then looked at census data and ended up picking South Pasadena for the 6th zip code because just demographically it looked somewhat similar to Porter Ranch. Quest gave us data on complete blood counts, which include hemoglobin, hematocrit, white blood cell count, and platelets, and then also subtypes of white blood cells, neutrophils, lymphocytes, basophils, eosinophils. Those are all pieces of data that Dr. Nordella and the USC researcher had. And then there are a few other CBC parameters as well that we were able to get that I think are of lesser importance, but nonetheless, we have the data. And then in discussions with Dr. Nordella, we actually ended up getting some additional data on liver function and also on kidney function. So we have the data. We've begun analysis. I'm happy to say I've been waiting a long time to begin this. I have 2 really excellent epidemiologists that are in the midst of analyzing the data. It's worth noting these 2 analysts didn't have anything to do with the response to the blowout. All they know really is what I've shared with them in background information and on the data that we have. I would say we're about a third of the way through the analysis. One other thing I'll add that I think was really helpful, that the data that Dr. Nordella presented just had, the only dates they had were the years of data collection, and Quest was willing to give us month and year. So that gives us a little bit more precision in looking at the temporal, the trend over time. So we started by looking at that trend over time. By month and year, we've looked at, so far just the CBC parameters, just some of the CBC parameters. We've looked at hemoglobin, hematocrit, white count, and platelet count, and looked at the trend lines for each of those by month and year within 91326, separately for adults 18 and older and for children 5 to 17. And we've begun now comparing the results in 91326 with the other zip codes. We're starting by grouping the 3 zip codes that Dr. Nordella and the USC researcher did. And then we're going to group the other 3 zip codes and compare. And then we've already grouped all 6 of those comparison zip codes together and have done a comparison. So So we're making progress. I've told the team I really want to be able to share results, full results by August, including statistical analysis. You can kind of eyeball the trends by looking at the figures, but there's a lot of sort of up and down zigzagging from year to year, and just random variation, and some of it relates to why people are going in to be tested. But we want to do some statistical testing also before we share publicly, just to be sure of what we're presenting. I'm happy to share the very, very detailed tables. The only limitation is we wouldn't share any results that would allow even potentially the identification of a given individual, but happy to provide the aggregate results down to the month and the year level, by gender, by age group. And the data set should be available for outside researchers. For example, I've asked Chris to make sure it's listed as a data set available to the researcher or researchers that are funded to do the health study. I'm open to other sorts of arrangements as well, but I want to make sure it's a qualified researcher. I would have to also go through our process of data use agreements with county council review and approval. I've heard mention that this is de-identified HIPAA, sort of HIPAA exempt data, but a 5-digit zip code is considered protected health information under HIPAA. A 3-digit is not, but 5-digit is. So, so it is by definition HIPAA, but that's not an absolute barrier to sharing. It's just that it's got to be shared with a data use agreement and just certain parameters in place to ensure the confidentiality of the data. So I'm happy to stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Simon. Just see if there are any comments or questions. Sure, Dr. Davis.
Yeah, one of the other things that could happen is, as part of the study, some researcher could propose to utilize that data and do another analysis or a similar analysis. That is a possibility as well.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Any CAG members with questions for Dr. Simon? I see Craig. And Becky, I do see your hand up. We'll be beginning public comment in about 10 minutes or so, and you're the second one in line up for that. So thank you for your patience. Craig?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Dr. Simon, for giving us the update. I was very much involved in wanting to see the CBC study done with the Quest data. So one of the things that we talked about was the need for transparency, the need for engaging with the community so we can instill that trust, that path to confidence. And one of the things that we discussed and had conversations directly with you and Dr. Nordella was the sharing of the data with another independent researcher. So in other words, as soon as the data came in, we suggested this idea as a great way to have full transparency and gain the confidence. And I think you probably saw the charts in the beginning. There's a lot of no confidence in the community. So here was a path to create that. So we agreed that the data could stay within DPH, but simultaneously, so that we're certain that it wasn't touched, altered, whatever. So we have confidence that it goes over to another independent researcher who you vetted, which was Susan over at USC, which is the same one that Dr. Nordella used. Why wasn't that done?
So the key word there that I wasn't aware we agreed on was simultaneous. I definitely agreed to share the data set with a well-qualified researcher, but I wanted to do the analysis first because I want to make sure it's done accurately. And I feel like we have a responsibility to do that. We're, as part of that process, we're happy to share the SAS code, the programming code we're using. We're happy to share the detailed tables. I'm happy to meet with any researcher and walk through the steps that we're taking in the analysis. But I don't want an independent researcher to present results publicly that we've not had a chance to sort of validate and ensure that they're accurate. So I do appreciate the concern, and I've heard over and over and understand the lack of trust. I hope you all have some trust in me. I mean, I've been involved with you all for a long time. I'm actually very excited to do this study. The one area where that California Center for Science and Technology said that there could be a potential risk was the VOCs and benzene. Even though the measures that were done, the results that were found with the air monitoring were about almost 1,000-fold lower than what's been reported in the literature as a risk from benzene. I do appreciate the argument that this was a polytoxin exposure. Mm-hmm. There could be synergy, and so I'm actually quite excited to do this analysis. If we find something, I'll be the first person to report it out. I mean, I'm happy to do that. But the situation has been very, very politicized. And frankly, I think there's been a lot of, we could spend a whole day talking about this, but I think there's been a lot of misleading information in a whole number of areas that have been to the detriment of the community in some cases, because I think the information is misleading. And so I want to make sure that what we put out is accurate, and then I'm happy to have it shared with an outside researcher.
Okay. I am very confident that if you would have provided the data simultaneously, there could have been a professional exchange of findings, methodology, and a concurrent of the findings before going to the community. Now, whether you have the purest intentions, your organization has not demonstrated, and your leadership has not demonstrated full compliance and full transparency with this community. There have been deceptive practices. So there was an opportunity here to prevent that from happening with this study. And I just have to finish this last thought, Susan. So by you saying we want to get it right, puts doubt in all of our minds, because you've had this data for whatever long. There is the opportunity, and I'm not saying you would, but it's the opportunity for someone to alter this data set. There is that possibility.
Your reservations in the study have been noted, but I think Dr. Simon also noted his commitment to this study as well. So I just want to note that you said us all, so I don't know that that's necessarily true with all the folks that are on in the meeting tonight. So, but your reservations are definitely noted, Craig.
Well, Susan, it's been proven time and time again. So Dr. Simon, is there any reason why you wouldn't offer the data to a mutually agreed upon researcher immediately?
Yeah, I think I gave the reason.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to make sure that we address the public comments. I know we're already a little bit behind, but we do have a couple of folks lined up.
Thank you. You confirm my suspicions.
Okay. Sorry.
So there is one more item, which will be a pretty short report because we don't have the data or information to publicly share right now. But I want Charlene to address the budget.
Sure. Hi there.
Right now with the verbiage we use to the budget summary. Thank you.
Great. I know it's been a topic that's been asked for repeatedly. But what I want to convey is that, public health, our goal is to allocate the vast majority of the settlement funding to the research. We want all, if we could put all the money there, we would. And so what we've been doing to assure that the vast majority of the money gets there is we have been providing in-kind support into this initial development. And the initial development phases, as the CAG has talked about, have been focused on identifying the health concerns and the research priorities through this community engagement, and also establishing the systems needed to launch the study. And so these funds were allocated, some of these funds were allocated to support the important work. And I'll give you for instance, the settlement funds were used to implement the community opinion survey. This community opinion survey provided valuable insights on the experiences, concerns, and priorities of the residents. We also utilize the settlement funding to collect the environmental data that we talked about, collection and testing of the samples from the waste materials from the Aliso Canyon blowout and the well control attempts. So with that, what I want to say is that we are trying to be as transparent as possible, and we're working on the best way to present the budget information to you. But you know, the budget information, or the amount, the information will be stated in the RFP, which, as you know, will be out very soon. And that all that information will be available when the RFP is released. Due to the procedures in place by our Contracts and Grants Division, we're unable to release a lot of the information before the official release. So that's why it's hard for us to give you the line item that you're asking for. So we are still working to try and figure out how to give you the information you're asking, at the same time respect the process.
Charlene, I see Brian has his hand up. I just wanted to make a time check, and I see Andrew as well. So we'll do Brian and then Andrew, and then I definitely want to make sure we get to public comment here in the next few minutes. Brian?
Okay, thank you. I want to be nice. Well, I don't want to be nice, but I will be nice. And I will say that from a standpoint of the money in general, it's public money. It's not DPH money. It's not CAG money. It's not researchers' money. It's public money. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out how anyone can say to the public, no, we can't give you numbers. This should be very transparent. There is no reason that I can imagine or that I could invent that would cause any organization, especially governmental, to withhold specific funding information. You don't have to tell us the exact name of who you funded, the vendor's complete address. You don't have to tell us who the researchers are, but I can't imagine $25 million not being budgeted, not being obvious to everyone as to where we're spending it, how we're spending it. And when we have spent money, how much did we spend? How much did Katzen Association get? How much did anybody get so far? I can't imagine how anybody can say with a straight face, we can't give you that information yet. It's 2 years down line, and it is appalling that we are in this situation. It's a simple request, and it's transparency at its finest, and it is public money. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Your comment is noted. Andrew?
I think Brian deserves a response to that before I go.
I think Charlene tried to address that as well as she could in her comments. I don't know that there's more, unless there's someone else from DPH.
Also, let me. Yeah. So it's not that the funding won't be released; it will be released. What Charlene was talking about in terms of the amount that's going toward the study is RFP information that will be released with the RFP. But we will release a budget in terms of what's been spent thus far. That's coming. So don't think that it's not.
So we can expect a legitimate accounting when the RFP is released. Is that a fair statement?
No, that's not what I said. No. I'm talking about the amount for the RFP, what's going into the RFP. But in terms of what's been spent so far, we are working to get that out for you guys. It's not, she's not saying that we wouldn't release any budget information.
Oh, okay. Let me change the parlance, because I don't really care about the budget per se. The budget is going to be a dynamic thing. And accounting for what has been spent, or to be clear, the position is an accounting of what's currently been utilized is not able to be shared until such time that the RFP is out or researchers selected, or just clarify, please.
No, that's what I just said was we can account for what we spent. What she's saying is that we can't do is say what's going into the RFP right now, because it's in that RFP process, and that part will be released at that time.
Okay.
But as I said, we will release. Hold on. what you're asking for, I'm saying we can release in terms of what has been spent, and we're working on getting that to you guys.
Okay.
So that's all. That's just to be really clear about that.
Okay. So it's been like 4 or 5 months since that's been requested. I'm just putting that out so the public knows, because the public, members of the community did specifically in these meetings ask, as well as the CAG has asked. I will just anecdotally say, I continue to be disappointed with how long every single little thing takes in this process. From an overarching, I just wanted, from listening to Dr. Simon talk about the CBC, if anyone walks away from this meeting saying that there's a transparent partner in this process, then they've been smoking something. I continue to be so fundamentally disappointed to my core at how this entire process has been moving. The absolute, there's no other word for it really, minimization and whitewashing of every single thing that's happened. I just, on a human level, as a victim, as a community representative, there truly are no words to describe the last 23 months.
So Andrew, I don't want to cut you off, but I do want to make sure that we hear from Sam and Becky, and if there are other members of the community that would also like to speak, we do ask that you hold your comments for about 90 seconds, and I will unmute you to allow you to speak. And if there are others, again, raise your hand or make a note in the chat and we'll be certain to recognize you. So I will start with Assam. And I believe there we go.
All right, thank you. 90 seconds is going to be a rush, so I'm just going to go through it. My name is Usam Nejim. As a member of the public in this community who continues to be intimately engaged in the Aliso matter, I want you to know that I understand and I support what DPH is doing in this process. I recognize that you have legal limitations that prevent you from doing certain things, and I respect the decision of the county, regardless whether I agree with it or not. I also do understand the need to maintain the confidentiality of the SOC process from deliberations and the RFP development, and I look forward to seeing the product of the work. I do want to ask that you take the following request to the SOC for their consideration. Please ensure that the scope of work explicitly asks the contractor to include a budgeted task that provides for public engagement and public input at the start of the study. I'm not just talking about providing public information, but for them to respect the community's desire and right to provide technical input to the scope of work. There are plenty of intelligent and informed members of the community who can make a positive contribution to the study. Recognizing that the funds have a cap, I urge you to ensure that the scope of work is not for the full funds and that you reserve maybe 20% of the allocated funds for on-call services that may arise either out of the public input that adds to the scope of work or out of the initial work that opens door to other areas that need exploration. The last thing we want to hear is that this is a good idea, but there's no budget for it. I do want to tell you that it's unreasonable to expect the public to fish for information on the website. The public needs the information pushed out to them and not have to go find it. I ask that you include email newsletters to the community that include concise and meaningful summary of data and information that are emerging from the DPH's own work and from the health study. On the radioactive particles, I don't think it is appropriate to make a statement about whether the particles settle or don't settle. It is appropriate to say that we either don't know or that we did not detect them based on the analytical method used and when and how the samples were conducted. On the CBC data analysis, Dr. Simon, I understand and I agree that DPH should conduct this analysis first, but I do think you should find a way to put out the database in its raw form into the public domain in a manner that does not violate the privacy laws, but you should not have to choose who works with the data and how they analyze them. Let the public domain do its job. And finally, I want to say, there is no reason on the budget, there's no reason for you not to say that 5 or 10% of the settlement or whatever will go towards the management of the study. That is common and expected and not unreasonable. There's nothing wrong with that. And if anyone does not like it, that's their problem. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for your comments. Becky? I think you're still muted, Becky. there you go. It just almost.
I thought you were going to unmute.
There you go.
Me. Okay, thanks. Esma, I agree with you 100%. I have a couple questions listening to Matt. I didn't hear any dates. I know that this whole thing happened way before it was announced in November. I lost my husband during that time. I have questions about the platelets and how this blowout affected platelets in Homo sapiens. There were spots on our cars. What were those spots? Where'd they come from? I mean, what's the chemical analysis? Because my cars, my home, everything was covered with all of these spots. Airplanes were not allowed to fly over this area. And the other thing, it's been 5.5 years, almost 6 years. And in my case, when I found out about it, September, which was way before it was announced, and we still are asking elementary questions. And we should be way far ahead of this game at this point in time. I know Braemore had gas storage tanks there before homes were built. This community has been exposed to this for a very long time, way before the blowout was announced. And I'm not hearing any factual information. I'm hearing a lot of subjective stuff and a lot of maybe this and that, but you guys are the health department. You're the experts. We aren't. And I'd really like to hear what really happened. So thank you so much, Susan, for allowing me this few minutes. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Becky. Looks like we are nearing up on 8 o'clock. I don't see any other community members that have their hands raised or unmuting to speak. So we will go ahead and wrap up tonight's meeting. And thank you all very much for your questions, for your passion, for your continued commitment to this project. Please provide additional questions if you have them. And as always, the team will continue to respond and to continue to ask for your patience as things get posted and made publicly available. If there's anyone from DPH that wants to make any other closing comments, I'll hold the space for a second.
Yeah. So this is Dr. Davis. So, we walked into this in terms of our team, with an understanding of DPH is not trusted. We've heard from Craig a number of times, and Andrew and others, that DPH, is not doing all that it can do. The team has been working with the same goal of trying to understand and answer the questions as to what were or are the health impacts from this blowout. No motive other than that. We've been operating under some legal constraints, some procedural constraints, but no one's going to modify the data. And that's absurd to even think that our team would do that. And so I'm really, commend the team for doing all that they can within the constraints that we have to try to get these questions answered. Very early on and throughout this process has been that DPH is not trusted to do the study. DPH is not doing the study. This is for researchers to come up with the way of answering those questions. And that's what the SOC has been working on, thinking about. What are these priorities? How should this RFP be structured in order to allow researchers to best put their proposals forth to answer the questions, what were the impacts related to this blowout? And that's what our team has been focused on, and that's what we continue to do, and that's what we will continue to do in terms of moving forward. We're not trying to hide anything. We're not working with anybody in particular in terms of, the comments about, DPH is protecting SoCal Gas. No, that's not the case. We have been working with your best interest in mind in terms of getting answers to that question. What were the health impacts from the study? And we will continue to do that throughout this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Good night, everyone.